We'll start in a few minutes. Oh, okay. It is 1:15. We're just going to give people a couple more minutes to trickle in. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Good. Feel free to unmute and say hello or show your webcam at any time. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. I believe they started the recording, so we're good to go. Hey, everybody, good afternoon. Hope everybody's coffeeed up because we have some great presenters for you today. My name is Leora Waldner, and I am a professor of public administration and an associate dean for strategic innovation at Troy University. And I remember back in the day when I was a student, nobody told me anything. There was so much I didn't know. Anything from how to get basic needs met all the way to, is a PhD worthwhile? To, if there's a leadership role, how do you get to that role and break through a glass ceiling? Even things like, how do you get a mentor? So today we've decided to bring you a panel talking about, gee, I wish somebody had told me that. And these are our collective 50 years of things that we've experienced, both in our own professional development careers and mentoring our students and our alumni that we wish we had known and that we want to get a chance to tell you. So I'm going to introduce our panelists and then we'll start. They'll each be presenting a bit. We'll be able to take a couple questions. And we also have a take-home gift for you at the end, which is our Troy Career Roadmap, which will really help move your career plan forward. But let me start by introducing our panelists and my friends. Let me start with Danielle Hudson. She is a lecturer at Troy University in the chemistry and physics department. She has 15 years of experience in teaching higher ed, chemistry, physical science, and earth science. Currently, Danielle is working on her PhD in chemistry education at Auburn University because she is someday going to become a director of these amazing STEM outreach programs. So Danielle, would you like to say hello for just a moment?
Hello.
Hello, glad to have you here today. Next, I'll introduce Dequies. Dr. Dequies Lanier serves as the area coordinator for the Atlanta and Augusta, Georgia support centers of Troy University. She served with the university for over 10 years in student affairs, and she teaches within the College of Education in the Leadership Development Division. Dequies, would you like to say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to be here with you guys.
Great to have you here, Dequies. Next, we have Dr. April Upshaw. She is an assistant professor in the Counseling, Rehabilitation, and Interpreter Training Program at Troy University, and she has worked extensively with the child welfare system, providing counseling in various settings to foster children and their families for permanency and reunification. Her research interests pertain to life skills attainment within the foster care system and advocacy for those impoverished and underrepresented groups. April, would you like to say hello?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So glad to have you here. All right, and presenting along with her will be Dr. Dana Wilson, and she actually serves as our Human Services Program Coordinator for all of Troy University system-wide, where she creates and facilitates inclusive learning platforms that integrate diversity and equity with a focus on self-awareness and anti-racist practices towards vulnerable, underserved, and marginalized populations. Dr. Wilson's research interests are evidence-based with women, poverty-stricken communities, and BIPOC people at the forefront. Dr. Wilson, would you like to say hello?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited about the information today. So good to see everybody.
And we are very excited to have you here. I've heard their presentation before, and I got to tell you guys, it is very revelatory and informative, as are everybody's. Last but certainly not least, we have my dear friend, Dr. Rosser-Mims, who is a full professor and vice chancellor for the Troy University Phoenix City campus. In her 20 years of teaching in adult education and training and development, she served in numerous leadership roles, authored several journal articles and a book, and has been the recipient of more prestigious awards than I can recount here, because it would take me about 2 hours to go through her awards. Dionne, would you like to say hello today?
Hello, and Leora, thank you so much for that wonderful welcome and overview. And I am excited to be here and glad to be with my colleagues. You guys rock. So I'm glad to do this with you.
Absolutely. Folks, we have the dream team here, and we're going to tell you things we wish you know and we hope will help you. Feel free anytime during our presentations to put a question in the chat box. We'll be monitoring it and we'll make sure your question gets answered. And again, we'll have little bits of times for questions after they present and a lot of time at the end because we want to really encourage discussion. So how about we start with Danielle Hudson today? She has been researching career needs and career services for BIPOC students, and she's found a lot of interesting things and theoretical basis that she'd like to share with us. Danielle, off to you.
Thank you very much for that, Leora. Let me share my screen. Okay, so good afternoon again. Today I'm going to talk to you all about BIPOC students and career services. Let's see. Okay, so the question is, what do BIPOC students need in terms of career services and what strategies benefit them most? So I'm going to share what I found in the literature, and I'm going to also share about things that I have personally experienced during my process as an African-American woman going through undergrad at Tuskegee University. So the theoretical frameworks for this, my talk today, are human capital theory and then social cognitive career theory. So human capital theory came about as a result of a gap that could not be explained of the economic growth that we were experiencing here in the United States. So for the early part of the 50s, the economic growth, things were produced by physical labor, land, and management. But in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was this boom of economic growth. So qualitative researchers looked into it and they found that there was this gap. And the gap they called is human capital. Okay, so what that basically says is that human capital, your skills, your learning, your knowledge, that ability to go to college and learn things actually produced and is valuable to companies that are trying to produce goods and services. But there's also a second part to it, whereas we know that when it comes to social cognitive career theory, people don't just select careers based on just pulling it out the sky. Social cognitive theory states that people choose careers based on behavior, environmental forces, influences by individuals, expectations, decisions, and then outcomes. I can say that I'm very familiar with this one because I was actually going to go into the medical field because my family, that's what I saw. That was the influences around me. That was my environment. I had lots of professionals that were medical professionals. However, I actually did not like seeing blood drawn. And so that caused me not to go into the medical field. But even with me going into chemistry and math, that was still an influence because my mentor from early on was a chemical engineer. So as college students, as young adults, we have this plan. We want to go to college, we want to get a degree, and then hopefully that's going to lead to some type of job and or career. But if you've never been to college, you don't have anyone that models this behavior for you, then you may be lost. You get to college, you don't know what to do. There are all kinds of services that are actually offered that we may not know about. There are career services that you may not know about that you can take advantage of. There are social services, you can join organizations that helps you develop. All of these things are important for you to end up getting to that degree and that job. But in order to get to the degree and to the job, we have to finish the course, okay? So looking at just the graduation rates here, and this was the latest data from 2016, we have tons of people that are graduating. However, we don't have tons of students that are Black, Brown, Indigenous students that are graduating. So roughly this was from 2018, 2019, over 1 million bachelor degrees was conferred. And then when you look at master's degrees, over 800,000 master's degrees were conferred. But when you look at the graduation rate within those numbers for Caucasians, it's over 64, roughly 64%. Black and African-American students that identify as that was right at, a little bit over 10%. Hispanic students are performing a little bit better than when it comes to African-American and Black students. They're still well below the over 60% for Caucasian or students that identify as white. Asian Pacific Islanders actually they don't fare as well as the Hispanics, but they perform a little less than African American students. And then American Indian and Alaskan Native students are less than 1% that actually graduate. So of course, the goal for graduation is to get a job. How do you end up getting that job? 40% of students visit the career services. The 16% of them that actually visited found that the services were helpful. But now when you look at the BIPOC population, the only statistics I was able to really come across were for African-American students. Of the African-American students that actually visit, 66% of them that visit are actually fully employed once they visit career services. That's a huge number because we know that African-American students are actually twice as likely to be unemployed versus their white counterparts when it comes to graduation, young students graduating. So it is valuable. There is value in going to see the people at the career services. The part of the problem that students don't know about career services, they don't have that understanding or need to see the need for career services. And when I looked at the research in diverse education, they talked about the fact that student services is something that's really on the outskirts. And because it's something on the outskirts, it needs to be, and we want it to be successful with students, then we need to do something to bring this about for students to actually be able to use. So the strategies that they talked about, exposure. So exposure is very key for BIPOC students graduating and getting a job. So you need to develop them into leaders. You need to expose them to leaders, expose them to different career paths early on. That's key to it. A lot of their counterparts come to college with exposures from their parents' professional networkings. They may have had a professional network of organizations that they belong to when they were in high school. And so they already have a leg up. The other thing that was talked about is mentorship. So mentorship is very important. You need to have BIPOC students being mentored by people that look like them so that they can know that it is something that is achievable. I will say that for me personally, mentorship was a big part of my life. I've had a mentor from the time I was in the 6th grade. He was a chemical engineer. He was very influential. I actually wanted to, when I decided not to go into nursing, I was like, well, I'll be a chemical engineer. It turns out I didn't go into chemical engineering, but I went into math and chemistry. So it was still something very much so related. That mentorship has carried me out through not just my career as an undergrad, but it's carried me out my career through up until 2018 when he passed away. So there were always times, I may not have talked to him every day, but there were times when I needed to talk to him and work through issues and things that was going on. And so I had that was available for me. The other thing is that they say that the research is saying is that we should have career services built into curriculums. It doesn't need to be something on the outskirts. Students need to know what's available. Students need to have the plan, a roadmap for them that's offered through career services. So not just something on the outskirts, something that's in their face that they have to deal with. The other thing is that they need to have a diverse staff and it needs to be a warm environment. So having someone that looks like you when you walk into a space that you've never been in before is very important. You want that environment to be open and warm to students and not be a judgmental space where if they come into the situation and they don't know everything, that they'll have staff that are willing to offer them guidance. And that goes into the safe space. You want it to be a culturally sensitive space when you're looking at it, that offers all of these things, that tells them how to get a mentor, that shows them that ropes, that exposes them to companies that will be culturally sensitive, that offer safe space for them. So these are some of the strategies that are helpful for BIPOC students to use in order for them to use career services to get the job, and that would also help to increase their graduation rate. So here are my references. Any questions?
We'll have time for about 2 questions before we move to the next presenter. Feel free to either unmute and ask or put them in the chat box. Okay, let's go ahead and move to Dequies then. And Dequies is going to be talking to us about how to get tips to get into graduate programs and PhDs and whether some levels of that higher education are worth it or not. Dequies, off to you.
Thank you so much. Let me see if I can get it on presentation for you. Okay, can you guys see that?
Perfect.
Let's see. All righty. Move that out of my way. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys. So I will be moving over into whether or not a PhD is worthwhile, and also speaking to you about strategies for students to successfully matriculate and finish that degree. And I largely will be speaking from my experience in enrollment management. So I would like to overview the 3 specific things that we're going to be talking about. So factors that impede progress, and then applying to graduate school, talking about a couple of things that we see in enrollment management that, you know, can be issues and things that we need to focus on for our students to help them apply and have a strong application packet. And then finally, we'll finish out with if a PhD again is worthwhile. So let's begin with factors impeding prospective students' progress. We're going to start with the first one, an inability to define career goals. So a lot of times what we're seeing is that students who are wanting to come and complete that next level degree cannot really tell you what they want to do next. They are not even sure which type of degree they should go towards. And a lot of times it's all hinging upon the fact that they have not done their research. And it's very important that students, or prospective students rather, are doing extensive research to take on that next higher level degree to advance in their careers. Without that research, they're unable to determine if they are choosing the right type of degree for themselves, if that next level degree is something they should be pursuing. So for example, some students who have a bachelor's may need to do certain certifications. For example, maybe a person in finance and obtaining their CPA licensure, and they may not need to get a master's. Or those of ours who are in K through 12, they may decide to do an EDS, a specialist degree, as opposed to possibly a PhD, just depending on how far they want to go in the school setting, if they want to become a principal or go superintendent level. And then we have those who are not sure what type of terminal degree, and that can really present issues once you've graduated and you've done this PhD, you've put in a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of money and commitment, but then maybe you cannot get hired in the right college or department because you do not have the right degree. So someone with an EDD really needs to think strongly about whether they need to be pursuing a PhD or perhaps a DBA if they're looking to teach in the School of Business, for example. And then we have issues with students not appropriately researching the institution, looking at accreditation and the university's reputation, excuse me. So we really try to steer prospective students away from for-profit private institutions. A lot of times it can be very hard, especially in higher education, to get teaching positions and become that professor when you have gone to schools that don't have the best reputation, or they're not appropriately accredited. So those are a couple of factors that can impede progress. It's, again, highly important for students to research what they want to do, and if what they want to do requires that next level degree, and if it does, what specific degree would get them to that next level. Now we want to talk about a poor application packet. This is number 2. So another thing that impedes progress is honestly lack of preparation. And there are several on the screen, but I will highlight a few. A lot of times students are not appropriately seeking out the right type of recommenders. So they may choose someone that cannot really speak to their professional or academic ability. So they may choose maybe their pastor at church or a friend that they know, a relative, and you really want strong recommendation letters. And it's important to prep your recommender as well. So if you have not been in school in quite some time and you have to go back to an advisor that you connected with well, you may want to provide them with certain documents that may help them in that recommendation letter, such as your resume or your transcripts, previous work or papers that you've written in their class or things like that, that'll help jog their memory to speak to how well you will do in the program. Statement of intent. I will really want to talk about that one because I specifically, working in enrollment management, have worked with one of the colleges who, was on the committee to let these students into their program, who've come back to me and said, nope, this one is going to get denied. You can let them know it's not going to work out. And when I took a look at the letter, or the statement of intent rather, the student or prospective student addressed the wrong institution. And there's no coming back from that. And the student asked, could they, resubmit a letter? But at that point, the review committee has already, pretty much made up their mind about whether or not you are prepared to be at graduate level study. If you have proofread, your grammar, your spelling, if you've looked at, what you're submitting. So, don't apply tired. Don't apply while preoccupied with other things that are going on in life. Find a quiet space where you can focus, making sure that you have studied for entrance exams, done practice tests and things of that nature. Those things are also very important. And then submitting your official transcript, sometimes that can slow it down. Interview preparation, and we'll talk about that a little bit further in the presentation, but preparing for the interview, making sure that you're doing practice interviews to get you ready, and also researching the different types of questions and things that you may be asked so that you're ready for those interviews. Research your interests. What is it that you're passionate about? Because that's going to be your thesis or your dissertation, looking at the program fit. So if you are a non-traditional student and you have a family, what type of format is going to work for you where you will not stop in your progress and you'll actually complete it. And number 3, mentors. So it's very, very important. And we just heard from Danielle Hudson on the value of mentorship. And from my own personal experience, I actually, there are 2 on the line today with me, my colleagues who I have, leaned on as mentors for me. And so personally, I don't think that I could have moved as successfully in my career without their expertise, their wisdom, and their guidance. They help answer questions that may not be readily available online. They can share their own experiences, things to look out for, things to prepare for and avoid. They provide resources to you, especially within your respective organizations that could help you continue to progress and grow. Inside tips for your degree completion, they can help you with that. And they also provide a professional network for you that you otherwise may not have had access to. And again, we've heard from this representation. Representation does matter. So seeking out mentors that look like you, that are in those positions that you desire, but then also mentors who may not quite look like you, but can share a different vantage point to give you a global perspective. And then financial support is number 4. And so with our students, especially first generation students, they oftentimes are not well advised or have the information to know how to seek out scholarships, to appropriately plan and save because they're first generation. So they may not know how early to start doing that. And then student loans, what I've seen personally is that a lot of students do not understand the difference between a private credit loan or a Department of Education loan, things of that nature. They're not prepared to understand the differences between accruing interest while in school and not accruing interest, subsidiary versus non-subsidiary. So things of that nature can also impede progress and cause students to stop because they were not financially prepared. And now we're going to finish out with if a PhD is worthwhile. All right, so number one, do you want to be in teaching and research? And really, I should probably say teaching, research, and service. If you don't want to become a teacher or a researcher, you may want to consider if that would be for you. So a lot of times that might be within the world of higher education or even certain government level federal jobs. To become a professor, you must hold a terminal degree and continue to further the body of knowledge. So while you may be a lecturer without that degree, if you intend to progress and become a full professor, associate professor, you'll need that terminal degree and to do considerable research. And then it also provides competitive edge, again, in those federal and government roles, and allows you to help develop curriculum because you've had that level of expertise. Seek impact and not status. That's number two that we want to be looking out for. A lot of times students who go for their PhD, they are oftentimes not really sure if they want to do the research and service and teaching that it requires, but they're looking to assume a certain social stature. So they want to be called doctor. They may not have plans for impacting the world through teaching, research, and service. It's just something next on their list to accomplish within their social networks. They may not have enough work experience to enroll in that PhD level program. And they may also decide that, this is something they can do to delay repayment of other student loans from prior degrees they've sought. And so another last one is because someone wants to be the first in their family to accomplish this great thing. And that's not a bad thing, but you can't stop there. You have to really think about how you want to create impact and contribute to the world. And then number three, commitment level. Can you commit 5 to 7 years to the research that it requires to complete that degree? How much debt will you incur? You really need to plan for being in school. Even if you enroll thinking that you're going to delay these student loans, you're still going to come out of school with even more student loans potentially, or out of pocket from your family's budget. Does your intended trajectory require a terminal degree? Again, make sure that before you expend time and energy getting that next level degree, that it's actually going to be worthwhile for your field. Do you have considerable work experience that can help you contribute to your research? And do you have a support system? So finally, we're going to round out with resources, speaking a little bit to some of the things you heard from Danielle. Students, especially the BIPOC group, really need to have a support system around them, especially those first generation students, to help them complete and not have their progress impeded. And that looks like, from Troy University's perspective, I'll share a couple of things that we have and from our experience that we provide for our students. We have a student success center where we try to create those safe places for students to come, and that's less intimidating for them to ask questions and not feel threatened to ask those questions, not feel rather, for lack of a better way to put it, not very smart to ask those questions. They don't want to feel stupid. We have a federal TRIO program. We actually are able to help those students that are underserved populations, low income households. We provide mental health support. And then our career services department, some of the things we spoke about earlier, we actually provide interview prep where students can, upload videos and practice interviewing and get real-time feedback on those videos from the career services department. We have resume and cover letter support, career exploration tools, Handshake tool, and Handshake actually helps students find those careers or do job fairs and things like that. And then social media actually helps students branch out and start creating those professional networks. So again, I am Dequies Lanier out of Atlanta, Georgia, representing Troy University, and the strategies that you heard about today and the things that are present as issues for our students, especially underrepresented or low-income families, are based on my experience from enrollment management.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lanier. We have time for a couple questions before we move on to our next presenters. Anybody want to ask Dr. Lanier a question? Oh, they are going easy on us today. They're waiting till the end, saving them up. All right, that is quite all right. Next up, we have Dr. Dana Wilson and Dr. April Upshaw, and they're going to be talking about basic needs, how to find them, and how institutions can help students find them as well. And this is an issue that's very, very important to me. Recently, we've heard that a lot of our students could not re-enroll for the spring semester because there was a gap between the amount the Pell Grant would pay and between their meal plan, right? So it was really just even being about to feed themselves and get food that was causing them that little bit of debt that would put a hold on their account. So this is actually a huge issue for students today. So April and Dana, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. Okay, can you all see the PowerPoint?
Yep, we sure can.
Okay, perfect. Got all this decoration now. I'm trying to figure out how to make it big.
There you go. Go to slideshow and hit from start. You should be all set.
You see slideshow?
Let's see. It's
I can't see it at the top of my screen. Let me try and move it down. I should see it, I think.
There you go. Rock and roll.
All right. So the title of our presentation today is I Needed Help Too, Supporting Students with Deficits in Their Basic Needs. I'm going to refer to Dr. Wilson as Dana because I think I will remember to say that better than to remember to call her by her official title. But we have these conversations all the time about where the problems lie. And I think most of us would agree that if we know someone is hungry, we would offer them food. And if we knew someone didn't have somewhere to stay, that we would try to link them to services. And so what we gathered in our conversations about this particular topic is that people probably lack awareness to their own circumstances. There are the stories that we tell ourselves about our circumstances that may make us think that this issue isn't as great as it is. And so you'll see me talk in the actual next slide from the one I'm currently showing you about some of the strategies that I use when I experience being at risk in some of my basic needs, where we may have all met up at someone's house for lunch, or I did volunteerism to be able to get free meals. And when we say to ourselves that we did or didn't experience being at risk for challenges with our basic needs, think to yourself, what would have happened if? And so what would have happened to my ability to provide for myself if volunteer opportunities didn't also offer me an opportunity to eat on days that I volunteer? What would have happened if I wasn't able to go to some of those social experiences where I was going over to a friend's house to be able to eat every Monday during the semester? Because what we probably retain in our memory is that it was fun going over to everybody's house and eating these meals, but we don't remember the practicality of it. We feel as if the next generation has it easier than us. They don't know, they aren't readily using their resources, so on and so forth. So as Dana and I talk about our experiences, I hope that'll give you an opportunity to reflect on your own experiences and then to translate what you remember of your own experiences to what may be happening on the campuses that you represent if you're a professor, or what may be happening in your community if you represent your community as a public administrator.
All right, thank you, April, and thank you all for allowing us to share what it looks like when students are at the highest risk for basic needs deficits. So there isn't a lot of study or research that speaks to the cause and the effect, but we know during the pandemic, there were a lot of gaps revealed, right? So students who were homeless, students who had, food, housing deficits, they were brought to the forefront because of the pandemic. We were out of school, we were online. And so we paid more attention because there was a sort of spotlight on that issue, okay? Homelessness, let's be clear, can also be defined as if you're living in a car, staying out of a car, or if you're staying on a family or friend's couch. That's also considered homelessness. A lot of people are like, oh, they're not homeless. They have a car right out here. They kind of have their stuff in there, and that's a place for them to stay. But how secure is car housing? If car housing was a real thing, how many of you would have a mortgage? I wouldn't have a mortgage, right? So, car housing isn't housing. A friend's couch, it may seem secure and stable because we're best friends this week. Next week, she hates me. Hey, I want you out by next week, by the next week, or hey, tonight, I want you out today. Get all your stuff today and get out. So couch is not sustainable or adequate housing either. Students also may avoid reporting being homeless. There's a lot of stigmas associated with homelessness. They could have feelings of being accused of being lazy, incompetent, mentally ill, and a host of other othering that we tend to do in United States culture. Students who maintain a greater risk slightly for their basic needs deficits are typically students in two-year institutions. Someone mentioned, I think it was Dequies, who mentioned first-generation students. They're a part of this group, foster care graduates, LGBTQ+ students, the BIPOC student group, we heard that mentioned a few times, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and students who with the lack of financial and academic support, which I believe Danielle mentioned in her reporting, and students who may have received support from Education for Homeless Children and Youth program or the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Next slide, please. So we can address what we cannot acknowledge. I was raised by a single mother with one income, as you see here. We lived in a housing project, so we called it says governmental housing here, but we all knew it as the housing project. And even with that, I ended up attending a PWI, a predominantly white institution in Tennessee. I was on a partial scholarship, and I also had a stipend, but while I benefited from that, I can remember occasions where the dining hall was closed. We played a lot of games on the road, so we were traveling, or it was during the holiday. We often had Thanksgiving and Christmas classics where, when we got back to campus, no one was there because campus was actually closed, which meant that dining was also closed. And so due to the NCAA regulations, coaches and boosters weren't allowed to feed, provide meals, money, or transportation for players. This posed a major imposition to my out-of-state status because I often end up going to my roommate's house to fill the gap for meals and transportation, both my freshman and my senior year. So now I'll pass it over to April and let her share a little bit of her own personal experience during this time.
What I love about working with Dana is that we have our own perspectives based off of our childhoods. And so my mother was an educator. A lot of people in my family were educators. And so with us being professionals, even though because I was in a one income household, which in one sense might have qualified me for some supports, the fact that I was from this professional family disqualified me from qualifying for things that would align with the fact that I was from a one income home. And so I fit in a gap. And so it would be logical to assume that there was actually more support offered to Dana to complete her education than was offered to me, even though based off of the slide that you're looking at, I faced more insecurity than she did. I'm sorry about my voice. And so Troy University is looking at some of these dynamics. And so in 2019, just before the pandemic, there was a study that was conducted on campus, on the main campus for the study was for the undergraduate students. There were 649 participants that completed the survey regarding food insecurity, homelessness, and housing insecurity. Excuse me, 85% of the respondents that completed the survey were freshmen who indicated one of the indicators of one of those three things. There was a small margin of seniors that also reported having at least one of the indicators that I just mentioned in food insecurity, homelessness, or housing insecurity. But what was surprising was that 24% of the respondents that were off-campus students also responded that they face one of these challenges as well. And so we have established that there is definitely a need on our campus. And even as individuals who work for the university, individuals who had our own lived experiences and know what college should look like, the fact that we were surprised by our own findings suggests that other universities or other entities that are able to assess for need in their workspace or in their school space may benefit from doing a similar survey or similar research. So that brings me to the question of how to help. And so I want to look at this from three different aspects. There's help here for students, there's help here for professors, and there's help here for public administrators. And so for students, I want to bring your attention to a service that's called 211. So it's kind of like 911 and 411, and 411 might be dating myself, but 211 is an app. It is something you can just dial on your cell phone. It is also connected to the United Way website because the United Way resource, any community-based agency, organization in your community that's receiving United Way funds can be identified by just calling or using the app or the online resource for 211. And so you just put in your zip code and it will let you know. So in your zip code, if you need help with your utilities, these are the services that provide that. If you need help with clothing or you need help with housing, so on and so forth. Now, there may be things that are a little bit more in proximity to where you are than others. And so even having that information, I think, is informative to you as a student, and again, to these other professionals or to these professionals as we continue this conversation and talk about 211 in other capacities. So the next bullet says, talk about it, be vulnerable, or your vulnerability can be your strength. And so if I had identified that I had challenges, there may have been supports that were offered to me that weren't offered to me because I didn't identify myself as needing supports. In my mind, I might not have really thought I needed supports because I was making it without additional supports, but then also there's that stigma. And that's even more true, I think, when you're coming from a professional family, which may not have a community image of having a child on campus who's trying to hold very true to a budget to make things easier for a single parent at home. Mentorship is more about character than experience. And so I want to make sure that in our conversation today about building mentorship, that we also emphasize mentors of good character. And so not to give away the latest episode of The Best Man or the series, but there was a situation there in which someone was seeking mentorship from somebody that made her uncomfortable. And so I want to make sure that I encourage you to seek mentorships that value your values. I have found mentorship in some unexpected places. So sometimes it's not the person that's in the corner office. Sometimes your mentor is the person who's a part of the janitorial staff. Maybe they're sharing with you their experiences of what their challenges were, and maybe they're helping you to stay encouraged. Maybe they're giving you a spiritual word to get you through. Maybe they are aware of the people who also work in that office or in that capacity, whether it's in the community or within that particular agency that you're affiliated with. that they can pinpoint to you that you didn't realize could have been an advantage to you. So always seek character above experience. Mentorship for a reason, a season, and rarely a lifetime. You will have mentors that enter into your life, and there will be lifelong mentorship relationships. But there may be opportunities that carry you a step further than where you are today, and that is okay. If you overanalyze the relationship, you may miss out on the opportunity to get to the next level by seeking or staying in a relationship that is no longer serving what you need at this point in your career. Doesn't sound good, but I hope you catch the message from it. Mentorship through YouTube, TED Talks, and other forms of media. We see this a lot when we think about the BIPOC community, is that sometimes we're seeking to go places where there isn't a lot of representation. And sometimes we might have to seek out other opportunities that aren't in our communities. I can't just call Oprah and ask her, how do I start, a $1 million business or a talk show on that national level. But that doesn't keep me from being able to utilize my resources, YouTube, TED Talks, and so forth, to learn more about her career, more about her challenges, more about the road to success. As professors, we can utilize 211 to be aware of community resources as well. That may look like being prepared for students as they ask us questions and need our assistance, but it could also mean figuring out where the gaps are and figuring out ways to advocate within the university for grants, for mentorship, so on and so forth, to be able to fill in those gaps. I think Leora mentioned about the housing gap, the meal plan gap that we noticed on Troy University's campus. And so the great thing is that we were paying attention. We were looking for the challenges, and we were able to pinpoint where those challenges lie. And so as professors, if we're aware that there are challenges and we start to see things on campus that concern us, think back to some of the pictures that you're seeing in these slides. If you see kids who stay, in the building long past when classes end, or you're noticing that students are carrying luggage bags to class or things of that nature, it starts to inform the questions that you might ask and the awareness that you might give to the situation that or that student or multiple students are experiencing. Create resources within the university that fill gaps. I think I just mentioned it. I'll move on to 5-star. Offer mentorships to the 5-star and the 1-star students. And you're probably thinking, 5-star, what is that? And I was just trying to find a way of mentioning that there are students who might come to the university with 4.0 GPAs. They may have done internships in the summer as kids. They've got this impressive resume as college students. And you may have other students who would fall beneath any scholarship opportunity GPA wise. They may have deficits in some of their professionalism skills about showing up to class on time, turning in assignments on time. And those students are worthy of mentorship opportunities as well. There's no rule that says that students who have a 4.0 will be more successful in life than students who have a 2.0 or a 1.0. There's also a factor there for tenacity, and there's also room there to better understand the student's story, to better understand why they haven't performed well in the classroom. Having a student who has undergone cancer treatments or has lost a parent or things of that nature can cause the snapshot of a GPA or those demographic information that we tend to think about all the time. It can skew that in a way that makes us think that the student is not motivated or that they won't be successful in their college career. And that's not always the case. And so dig deeper, find answers, and figure out if there's anything that we can do as professors to be of support to those students as well. And I guess it's a great segue into my last bulletin here, Troy University's Basic Needs Grant. And so Troy University, and this is a part of that research that I mentioned a few slides ago, in our efforts to better understand students and whether or not there are gaps in their basic needs, Troy University has established a basic needs committee, as well as supports for our Troy main campus students. These supports include laptop and textbook assistance, a food bank that's on campus, and a meal plan scholarship. And so these are small steps in the right direction. We hope to be able to grow these efforts with time. Public administrators, how can public administrators help? And so we've consistently talked about 211, and the same is true here. Being aware what services they provide and whether or not there are other needs that you have in your community that you can advocate for can be very beneficial to the population that you're serving. Mentorship at the secondary and the post-secondary level. There may be students who don't make it to post-secondary education without supports as high school students. And so we want to think about how can we mentor to both groups. Philanthropic charity events focus on addressing basic needs, whether individuals are donating items or money towards being able to fund those things. It's really important. Support from service and charitable organizations for funds and service, the National Panhellenic and Panhellenic support for funds and service, as well as creating opportunities for basic needs grant proposal writing workshops. Quite often people know that there's a need and they want to help, but they don't know how to help. And so we can create free or low-cost opportunities for individuals to come and learn how to write grants to get governmental money. Then that's so much more beneficial, especially in communities where there's a lot of need, than asking those individuals to go into their own purses and wallets to fund some of those needs. Seeking state and local funds to support basic needs within the community. Partnerships with local restaurants and grocery stores to prevent food waste. If we have the food, can we distribute it so that, again, it's going where their need is? That can also present some opportunities maybe to teach individuals how to be able to prepare food at home, or how to be able to make balanced meals at a low cost to the individual by using just these food items that would have been wasted otherwise. Get the word out in places that matter. And this is something I see from time to time where people have great intentions and they put the word out that they're trying to help, but they don't put it in places where people in need might see it. And so think about where people might go. I can remember spending hot days at the library so that I didn't have to run the air conditioner at home. And some people might utilize that as well. And so looking at libraries, looking at social service buildings, where individuals often go to receive governmental assistance with their needs, within colleges and departments of human services. So these are maybe future social workers or future community-based leaders. So if they're aware of these things, they can put the word out as they're looking at internship or any employment opportunities that they currently have. First responders. EMTs see a lot of individuals in need. And so if they know what resources are available, they can help us to get the word out, as well as medical facilities. And then I think that this carries me back to the very first thing I said about creating awareness of need. Trust that there is a need. And so you may start small with your efforts to be able to better ascertain how great the need is. And so you don't have to start off with some big building that's all encompassing. You may start off with a closet, an extra office in your building, and just see what the needs are. And then that way you can put the greatest bit of your energy and your efforts into addressing the needs that exist in your community. I've mentioned it a few times now, but I wanted to make sure that you walk away with just a picture of what we're talking about when we say 211. And so again, 211 is something you can download on your phone. It's an app that you can add to your phone. It's also, You can also utilize the United Way website in the same exact way. Is a way of connecting to the United Way funded organizations in your community. You just have to know the zip code. It doesn't have to be your zip code. Just what zip code do you need to find resources in? And it will assist you in finding names and numbers. And so, Dr. Wilson and I, we thank you for your time and we entertain your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Upshaw. I think that you're right on the money. If students, if they're hungry and their stomachs are growling and they're housing insecure, it sure is tough to do well in school. And I think if they know there are places to go, and also that this is a very common situation, that's the first step in the long-term success. Yeah. Any questions for Dr. Upshaw and Dr. Wilson? Okay, let's go on then to talk about leadership aspirations. We are blessed to encounter a lot of students that want to be leaders in a multitude of mediums, whether it's in public administration organizations or in higher ed. And so we've asked Dr. Rosser-Mims to come today and talk about her experience as a proven outstanding leader with her track record. How did she make it happen, and what tips would she share for others that are aspiring to that kind of role? Dr. Rosser-Mims.
Oh, thank you, Leora. Gosh, this is a tough act to follow. All right. So I will attempt to share my screen, and if you'll give me a thumbs up to let me know whether you see my slide here.
We see it.
Okay, fantastic. So my colleagues had reached out to me and had asked me to, as Leora shared, to talk a little bit about my experiences as an African-American woman, obviously, in my journey as a professional in higher ed. And I'll have to share this, and I don't know if my colleagues are fully aware of this. I initially started out as a public administration. That was my pathway. I thought I was going into public administration. I have a master's in public administration. And then interestingly enough, and sort of leading into this first bullet, in terms of my journey, it was sort of a windy path. And so part of what I'll share as a part of my presentation is my leadership journey. I'll also speak to, as a part of that journey, the importance of sponsors and mentors. And you've heard mentorship referenced just about by everyone who presented before me, and mentors are incredibly important to a successful leadership journey. And then I'll also speak to this phenomenon is known as imposter syndrome, and what relationship this particular sort of feeling or perspective may have had on my journey. And then I'll send you off if I can with a challenge or a takeaway. And so let's start with this notion of my journey. And I think that the first place to begin is I have to share with you my journey began as a military brat. I grew up in an environment where my father and my mother both served in the military. Now, my mother spent about 5 years, and then she decided to leave the military and to raise her kids. However, my father stayed in the military. So you have to keep that into context. So everything that I'm going to say moving forward is from that lens. So we were privileged, my older brother and my younger sister. So I'm the typical middle child. We traveled a good bit. We lived overseas. Again, that informed my who I am and how I show up in terms of my ability to work with people. So from there, the military environment, having grown up in that environment, to really spending my formative years in what I would view as a diverse, it's sort of culturally diverse environment. And then when I get to my middle school years and high school years, much less diverse. Okay, so, and then even into my college years as my peers, colleagues have mentioned, several of them went to predominantly white institutions, and that was my experience as well. This image that you see here, which is sort of a windy pathway, if you will, that really represents my journey, and in terms of my journey to where I am as a campus vice chancellor here at a predominantly white institution. And I might add, and again, as a part of the context of the story, is that I am and I will say the only female of color in senior administration at our fine institution. So how did I get there? You heard about the formative years, the global, and really the exposure to diversity at a broader scale. But it really, my journey really started with, and I have to go back to an experience that I had in high school that I think lit the fire in me to want to excel, to want to go above and beyond, to want to take, really to take risks, and also to challenge myself to constantly prove myself to myself that I can continue to strive more and to continue to excel. And I'll be very brief in this story. I was a senior in high school. I actually was a junior in high school. I walked into my counselor's office, and the gentleman at that time said, "Hey, Dionne, I went in with the intent of learning about what colleges were available in the state of Georgia." And so this individual essentially redirected me to two-year schools. He did not share any information about the four-year institutions, the R1 institutions, et cetera. And so that speaks to what April and Dana and others have talked about. If you're not exposed, if you're not mentored or coached or encouraged to go in certain directions, you're not likely to go into those directions. So fortunately, I have two, or at that time, and I still have, fortunate to have my parents with me, two strong parents who, and in particular, my mother, she forced me essentially when I left that office defeated, and with tears in my eyes, I went home. She forced me to go back to the school that very day, and she was with me, and to share with the counselor how I felt, and so that moment, and I have this visceral sort of feeling even as I'm sharing that story. That was a moment in my life where, frankly, I actually buried that story. I didn't share it with anyone. I sort of tucked it away because I felt embarrassed, right? And so years later, I finally felt comfortable sharing it. And so that instance unlocked in my mind this burning desire to constantly excel, not to overachieve because I want to outshine other people, but because I can do it. And so all of what I've shared really speaks to what I would suggest, what Alice Ely and Linda Carley have spoken about in terms of women's paths to leadership and really an advancement. And it's a difficult path to traverse. There are so many roadblocks that we encounter, whether it be our personal, barriers that we place on ourselves from a psychological, emotional standpoint, societal barriers, right? Organizational barriers. But guess what? There are ways to get beyond those barriers. And those several ways to do so, and one in particular is really relying on mentors and sponsors. So when I graduated from high school, prior to that, I did have what I would suggest were mentors, teachers who encouraged me to stay engaged and involved, which I was. And I went on to college. My parents, neither of my parents graduated from college, but I knew, and I grew up in an environment where they stressed the importance of learning, taking full advantage of the resources that are available to me, and I did just that. And then also being respectful and open, and having a desire to want to learn about other people and understand people, and not to make assumptions about the people with whom I'm interacting. And you heard that mentioned. I think April, you may have mentioned that, or Dana. And so connecting the dot to the mentors at high school, even at my collegiate level, was highly involved and engaged. My colleagues mentioned the mentors may not look like you, and it's important to have mentors who do look like you. But I'll tell you, the vast majority of the mentors, and I'll speak to sponsorship in just a moment. The vast majority of my mentors over the course of my journey have been, guess what, predominantly white and male. My very first Black female mentor that I would consider a mentor, other than my mother, was in college. My first college professor, communications professor, and to this day we have remained friends. And in fact, she is Gabby, and so several of my colleagues know my daughter, and so that she is Gabby's really close knit mentor and friend to Gabby. And so she was my first mentor that I can recognize in a professional environment who looked like me. Yet prior to that, I was able to still advance. I was still able to move, navigate, and really overcome a lot of barriers because I was not afraid. I was open to mentorship from individuals who did not look like me. Moving on to my doctoral level of work, and where I studied, too, again, the same story there. The mentorship, predominantly white, more women, okay, began to be introduced along my journey. My second mentor who looked like me was my chair of my dissertation committee. And she, hands down, and even to this day, we remain friends. She exposed me to what it truly means to both be a mentor and a sponsor. So I'll transition to this notion of sponsorship. So as you see on the slide here, it speaks to a coach talks to you, a mentor, a coach talks to you, a mentor talks with you, right? So you're sharing back and forth options. What is your vision? You're helping to develop your vision. However, a sponsor talks about you when you're not in the room. So this slide here, which I'm not going to go over in great detail, I'll have on display as I'm sharing a bit more about this notion of sponsorship and mentorship. I leave college with 3 degrees. This is at the bachelor's level, okay? Fully involved, the first African-American SGA president. I was the proverbial nerd, okay? Went to graduate school, just assumed that I was going to get a great job, fabulous job out of college, and did not. And so I started out as a receptionist at my alma mater. And it was at that point where I learned about the opportunity to earn my doctorate. I had no clue about the field of adult education, but it was a friend who was a mentor who opened the door for me to pursue a doctorate. And so what she did is she helped to develop me, she encouraged me, she offered insight, and she offered support. The sponsor who showed up, who was my then boss at the time, while I was a receptionist, and mind you, I stayed in that receptionist role for 6 months and then moved into a research coordinator position, which then afforded me the opportunity to pay to have my entire doctoral degree program covered, he served as a sponsor. So he helped me to craft a vision for my career. He enabled me to advance. So he said, hey, Dionne, here's this opportunity that may come your way. I want you to be prepared to apply. If I had been afraid, right, if I had not accepted the opportunity or took advantage of the opportunity to develop a relationship, a professional relationship with the expanded network that I began to develop, and in particular with this sponsor, I would not have assumed a faculty position at my alma mater. And mind you, folks, this is in the span of a 3-year period, okay? How did I do it? It's because I took full advantage of the sponsorship opportunities that were available. I also recognized the importance of expanded networks, and this is something that was spoken about previously as well. Your network should not, in my view, and again, in my humble experience, your network should not look just like you. And your network should be diverse from discipline aspect, from a thought, subject matter, background, if you will, geographic as well. So my network is global to include the resources that I have in terms of mentors and sponsors at all levels and geographically. And so having the network and also having the confidence to place myself in spaces where I'm the only, because I was not afraid to do that, I've been able to traverse, to advance in a relatively, I would say, quick period. Well, not really quick, but to have a successful advancement. And I'm surprised that I didn't mention this. Core to who I am, and this was mentioned earlier as well by one of my colleagues, is leadership is fundamentally, it's driven, in my view, by purpose and passion, right? And so much of what we talked about in the previous speakers, underserved populations, identifying individuals who may be in need. My entire career, to include when I was in high school, really was connected to just that, helping the underdog or helping to serve those who perhaps look like me or the underserved populations. And so my purpose and my passion have aligned because I've been intentional in ensuring that they were in alignment, and my career choices have followed suit. So I've traversed, I've managed to continue to move forward, still staying in alignment with my purpose and my mission. But gosh darn it, did I have some moments where I felt a little like, should I be here? Am I ready? Is this a place for me? When I walk into a space, I don't see anyone who looks like me. And do I have those moments where my heart skips a beat, or I feel a little intimidated? So I will say this: earlier in my career, absolutely, all of those moments, all of those reactions, those visceral sort of feelings occurred, and at the time and earlier in my career, I had didn't have any words to explain that feeling, what I was actually feeling. And so, as many of you are probably aware, there is now language that speaks to those feelings that I just described, and it's the imposter syndrome. So that image that I showed you of the sort of the winding pathway, a lot of those corners, in my view, are representative of for women in particular, this notion of we may not feel like we are good enough, we're ready, that our skill set is that maybe we shouldn't be where we are. And when we have those notions, we have those feelings of deficiency, in many respects, it can derail your pathway to success as well as advancement. And so I have some really startling statistics here, and these are as current as October of 2022, that 75% of women executives across industries have experienced at some level imposter syndrome. 74% of women in executive roles found that their male counterparts don't experience the same feelings of doubt, self-doubt as much. And an even whopping higher number is 81% of women executives believe they put more pressure on themselves not to fail than men do. And I would submit in the range of meetings and contexts, the groups that I've worked with, inevitably this comes up, in particular, this last statistic. I'm around a lot of high performers, a lot of high performing women. In fact, just as recent as last night, there was a group of my colleagues, we meet monthly, and they're all across the United States, and some are overseas. And this notion came up, what do I do now that I'm transitioning? I'm out of a position where I've been constantly on this train of success, and now I want to get off that train, right? And what does that say about my identity? What does that indicate that I'm not a high performer, or does that paint a negative picture about me? And so we obviously had to say to ourselves, absolutely not. Do not be you should not be no one should be apologetic about making that hard choice to take care of you and to put you first. So this notion of imposter syndrome, yes, I've experienced it. The latter part of my career, less of that, and for this reason. I firmly believe, as I mentioned earlier, about this notion of passion and purpose and knowing what that is. I have not been privileged to be in spaces just to be there. I was put in these spaces for a reason. And I recognize that, and I take full, it's something that I hold near and dear to my heart, and I do not take it lightly. And so as leaders, when you understand your mission, when you understand your purpose, this notion of imposter syndrome will become less and less something that controls you and takes over your ability to succeed. So where I am now, as a campus vice chancellor at Troy University, I shared with you, I served as a faculty member at my alma mater, and then I moved on to serve in, and I didn't share this, I served in a couple of additional roles within that, at that institution, and then moved on to Troy, and as a newly minted assistant professor in my first year, assumed a leadership role over a satellite location temporarily while I was still advancing in the professoriate. Fast forward in my journey with the institution, again, taking full advantage of all the opportunities that were afforded to me because the leadership believed in me, because I proved that I could do the job. And then also, I didn't take no for an answer. So as a result of that, I was able to assume local level leadership positions, also deanship role, overseeing a satellite, I mentioned satellite location, and then now to where I am as a campus vice chancellor in the Phoenix City community. I couldn't have done all of that if it was just relying solely on Dionne and this notion of Dionne's talents. It really rested with, and it still continues to do so, with the individuals who've been in my corner, who both served as mentors and sponsors. That also is rooted in my understanding of my mission and my passion, and what I'm supposed to do, and that is to continue to support and uplift the underserved populations. In addition to giving back. As a leader, my success is I couldn't have gotten where I am if I did not continuously give back and to share and to be a mentor and a sponsor to others. And so what does all this have to do with the public administration? And hopefully what I've shared in is this: as public administrators and as leaders, you have a responsibility to know the people with whom you work and their story. And so April referenced this, and I believe Dana referenced this point. If you don't know their story, you can't lead them. I mean, you've got to develop a personal relationship. You've got to ask questions. And then you also have to have an open mind as well. There may be employees, there may be individuals who have insecurities, right? Food insecurities, they're lacking in resources. And when they show up to their jobs, they may be showing up the way that they are showing up because they are lacking in some area of their personal life. So we have a responsibility as leaders to be cognizant of that and be aware and take the step to try to understand. And then finally, to bring this home into another connection point is take risks. And so this is my challenge. Be open to trying opportunities or trying out opportunities that you may not have considered initially. Continue to take advantage of professional development opportunities. Be a professional learner. Always, if you've got workshops that you can access, and be sure to take full advantage of that. And then lastly, be sure to give back. Reach back and teach one and teach others, but give back and be one of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rosser-Mims. I've had the blessing of knowing you for decades, and I haven't heard some of those stories, and knowing how much you have given back, and that there's one counselor that almost impeded that path, and your continued grit. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to say to the students out there and to the young professionals, it's okay to have imposter syndrome. Most of us have it, and I certainly did. I can't tell you how many times I call people and say, I should drop out of graduate school. I'm not smart enough to be here. So that is okay. Be kind to yourself. And please, please don't let it stop you from reaching out to somebody with questions, your professor, your advisor, your mentor. So very important. We have about 7 minutes for questions, but before we go to questions, two other things. I just shared out the Troy University's career roadmap, and I will not go over it today, but very briefly, I want to give this to you because our faculty and career services spent approximately 2 years developing it. So this is the fountain of all knowledge we have about careers. So if you want to take this over the next few months or over the summer and see, am I doing these 12 things to help boost my career? Everything from, is this a good cover letter, all the way to how many informational interviews have you done? And that includes going out to people who are doing the things that you want to do 5 years from now and asking them about their career path. So like Dr. Lanier said, you make sure that you're getting the right credential and not spending time on this PhD that won't get you where you need to go. There's also a great deal of information in here about finding a mentor. I think almost everybody talked about that today. What you don't want to do is go up to somebody and say, will you be my mentor? That's like going up to a cute guy in 6th grade and say, will you marry me? It's not something we do. But here's some information, advice on how to organically find that mentor, make sure there's good connective tissue and how you develop that relationship without asking them outright. Informational interviews, absolutely critical, probably the #1 thing I think students don't take advantage of. And professional associations, you are in the right place. You're coming here to COMPA. It is less expensive and much more powerful also to join as a student, so you can network. Try to meet 2 or 3 people, reach out to presenters that presented today and say hello to them, maybe ask them a question. So we have all this insider advice, and I would really encourage you. It's okay if you can't access probably 10% of the resources because they're Troy resources. 90% will be accessible to you, and probably at your university, or if you're an alumni, the one you just graduated from, they will make these services available to you, such as practice interviews and mock virtual interviews and all that good stuff. Before I move on to questions, and we do have just a couple minutes for questions, I also want to thank Dr. Christine Stillwell, because she has been a foundation for us. She's at the University of North Georgia in helping us develop some of the research that informed the lessons and tips we wanted to share with you today. So thank you, Christine. And let's move on to questions. Brian Alexander, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
So yes, I have one quick question. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
My question is in regards to graduate programs and undergraduate program. What is some of y'all opinions on undergraduate programs and public administration? I know we talked about career paths. We also talked about different levels, but we always, when we think of public administration, we always think of it on a master's doctoral level. A lot of people forget there are some universities that have it on a undergrad level. Southern University at New Orleans, Talladega College. So what is your opinion? Do you think that is a bachelor's level is okay enough to be successful in a public administration field and as executive official?
As a professor of public administration myself, I'll start with that one, and other folks can jump in. I think it's an amazing first step. And there's a lot of degree paths people reach before they go into civil service or government organization work. Public administration sounds like a perfect one. People can also get there from business or social services or HR, from other paths that way. You'll often find, especially as you go towards the higher level positions for federal executive service, et cetera, that it may require a master of public administration, but it's never a bad thing to get that first degree, go out and work so you can sort of fine tune the area that you want to be in, and keep doing those informational interviews, even if they're short 15-minute virtual coffees, to ask people about their past and see what's the next step for you. And I have a sense for you, Brian, there will be a lot of trainings and wonderful opportunities offered, and you'll have a good sense of what that next degree might be after that. So it's never a bad thing to plan ahead. But yes, absolutely, an undergrad degree in public administration is a fantastic first step and will help you get a foot into a government agency, but may not be the final step. Does anybody else want to comment on that?
Leora, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's not an either or, it's an and so Brian, just be prepared. You may even wish to pursue a doctorate, and that may be something that is on your journey for pursual. And
I am going to pursue a doctorate in planning, actually. Yeah. But actually, I wanted to hear from Dr. Amity, being a public administration, teaching public administration at a university. What is his opinion? Because I think he taught it at graduate and undergrad.
I concur with the comment that it's only the first step, but it's a good step with experience. You can launch into a career, and but I think when you get the master's, you're in a better position. Now the PhD, that opens up a number of questions, and there was a presentation about that if you can do something with a master's degree and certifications, that you don't necessarily have to do a PhD, then it becomes a prestige kind of thing. And I know we kind of say that might not be the way to go, but hey, whatever suits you. If you want to get a PhD for prestige purposes, I have no problem with that. But thank you for the question. I just want to say I enjoyed all of the presentations. Of course, I always have a million questions, and I guess the one that the mentorship thread that ran across all of the presentations caught my attention. And I think at the end, you kind of gave me some answer, but I was more concerned about how do you go through that screening process? How do you find a mentor? And I got from the presentations that it's going to be trial and error no matter what you do. So, except that Dr. Waldner said that she has the silver bullet, correct?
Yeah, it's in that career plan I just gave everybody. But I think find somebody you respect. For example, we had a graduation speaker come out, and I asked him afterwards, you mind if I call you in a few weeks and ask you a question? And I did, and we had a kind of a good vibe. So I kept kind of mentoring and giving him resources that were useful to his career. So maybe sorry about that. But just to finish my answer, find somebody that you respect, slowly reach out to them after you meet them just once and say, I really enjoyed your presentation. I wonder if I could ask you a couple questions, over the summer. Send them resources on things that are pertinent to their career and see if that relationship can develop, and they can be mentors from anywhere because you can do 15-minute virtual coffees very effectively. You don't want to take up too much of your mentor's time. But over time, if there's good connection there, you'll develop a very strong relationship. My mentor is a process re-engineer. He's one of my best friends now, and I've mentored him for how to teach online. So be open to that and take it slow. Use the tips we shared you. Noah, another question until we get booted out again. Did we lose Noah? I hope not.
Yeah. So
Noah, hello.
Hello. Yeah, quick question. So there was something posted in the chat and I don't see, because I think it's cleared up. Is it possible to?
Oh, of course, yes. So that is probably the career roadmap. And if anybody has problems accessing it, I'm putting in my email address. I can give it to you directly. And let me go ahead and push it out one more time, Noah. Thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. That's kind of a lot of effort went into capturing our secret tips and putting them in that document. And it's not just for graduate students, it's for undergrads as well. So please feel free to share that with whoever might want it. Other questions?
Of course, I have one last question, and it had to do with the presentation. I thought what Troy was doing with respect to addressing students that had particular needs was very interesting. Of course, there are also issues about people not wanting to be identified, having needs. And then also, I'm assuming that, and I was trying to pick this up in the presentation, that there's the 211, is that what, 211, but, is it more than just directing people to 211, or is there a follow through on the part to make sure, because a lot of people are not good with negotiating bureaucracies, even nonprofit bureaucracies.
Sure. So with 211, yes, it's basically essentially 411 for services. So you will get a name, a contact name there, usually like a director, the name of the agency and the telephone number. And so that's all that service is providing to you. With regards to Troy University and their basic needs grant and the subsequent program that we have on campus, we take a lot of effort to make sure that we're as discreet as possible with students who have needs. Our food bank is in our residence life area. And so it's in an area that would already be frequented by students. You can set up an appointment through a website. And so there are a lot of efforts that are being made to make sure that it's handled in a discreet, prideful way, because that's important to us as well.
And on the PhD programs, just this last thing, and maybe I may be wrong about this, but I always look at the program. I see the degree of diversity there is with students and the professor. And I also want to know when was the last time a person of color IPOC graduated from that program. And I think it's essential to visit and have firsthand contact. So that's just my observations. That's all I have.
I would agree. And I'd also say to be aware of the debt load. And when you do those informational interviews, ask folks, will I be able to get a job with a degree from this institution that I'm thinking about
That's
going?
true.
Because they will really tell you, oh, I don't know if I would do that one or not. Yes, exactly. Dequies,
And now,
any other things you want to put in there?
yes, I was going to speak to the comment you just made, actually. A lot of times now, universities are getting very competitive with their college landing pages. So the university itself as a whole, but then the different colleges like College of Business, College of Arts and Sciences, they are starting to put their stats publicly available on those web landing pages. So a lot of times they'll tell you on those web pages the stats for students that have gotten degrees and gone on to get certain career fields. And they'll tell you a percentage of their students that may have certain roles at some of these, government jobs and things of that nature. So that can help too when you're doing your research to see how well not only the institution is doing, but that specific college in making sure students are getting ROI on their investment.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Other questions?
One other thing that I did want to mention, if I was going to hold it if we didn't have time, but I just wanted to go back to the mentorship and sponsorship piece. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Rosser-Mims for touching on sponsorship, because even that was enlightening for me. But because I consider Dr. Rosser-Mims and Dr. Waldner to have served in those capacities for me professionally. And then I have some others that are, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I have some others that are at other institutions serving in certain roles. And for me, a lot of those relationships formed very organically from having already worked with them in certain ways at the university. And so the relationship grew from there. So the comfort to go and ask for support or questions, it just kind of built from there. And then some others from actually doing research with them, publishing with them. And so those relationships grew. So a lot of times they happened organically from already, having served in certain capacities with those individuals.
Yeah. So I'll ask Dionne, how do you get a sponsor?
Yeah.
Have time for
So that's a great question, Leora. I'll circle back to you in just a second. Well, I'll tell you what I look for in terms of developing a mentorship relationship is the person's heart. I'm looking for what motivates them. Why are they motivated to pursue whatever it is that they're pursuing? Is it about self or is it about other? Okay. And if it's about other, meaning helping others to get to where you want to go, but the ultimate goal is to use that next step in the rung to support and help others, and I'm with you 350% of the way. But if it's just about you, another notch on your belt, I'll still support you, but it may not be 350%. How do you access sponsorships or sponsors? Generally, they're going to seek you out if they see if there's a connection, if they see something in you. So I'll name one in particular, and he's going to say, Dionne, why'd you do this? Dr. Dassinger, for example, huge sponsor. I would not be where I am, and I don't generally say that. And I'll give credit where credit is due. But gosh darn it, he opened some doors. He said, Dionne, hey, be ready. And I said, okay, sure.
Nice.
So I kept doing my work, doing what I was supposed to do, but he said, be ready. And so when your sponsor says to you, be ready, you need to be listening, you need to be preparing. And then when the door opens, you need to take that door, walk into that door, walk through the door rather, or walk through the door with confidence. And so they're going to seek you out, and every single sponsor who has come along my journey, they have sought me out versus my seeking them out, because they saw something in me. They are the folks in the room who were mentioning Dionne's name. They're saying, hey, Dionne, consider Dionne. Even locally, there are some major projects that I'm working on in the Columbus, Georgia area. And my goodness, I've got some sponsors, and I'll have to toot the horn. Ben Moser with the United Way. April, you mentioned this. Yeah, Uh-oh, Leora, that's a stretch. But sponsors are, you got to have both, in my view. You've got to have mentors who are there behind you, rooting you on, but you also got to have those sponsors who are using their capital, their political capital, to take their stature and really their reputation and put their reputation on the line. And that's when they trust you, they believe in you. If they're willing to do that, and they don't see it as a risk, then that's a true sponsor.
Go. Thank you. And it looks like they're going to end the session in 57 seconds. I want to take time to thank all of the panelists and all of you for coming. The fact that you came here today signals that you are in the right place, looking for the right kind of guidance. The universe will bring you that guidance. Keep at it. And please feel free to connect with us if you want to ask more questions. It was a pleasure to spend some time with you today. Thank you, everybody.